How's it going, everybody? My name is Alex Gortney, and welcome to our first episode of Developer Soup. I'm here with my co-host, Nick Queen, and in today's episode, we're just going to do a short, brief introduction to who we are and a little bit about what this show's going to be about. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it on over to my partner, Nick Queen, and he's going to go ahead and do a little bit of introduction on himself.
Hi, my name is Nick Queen. So, since I'm not sure exactly, so do you want me to go ahead and start just introducing myself and a little bit of my history, or do you want to go first? It's up to you.
Yeah, just go ahead and introduce a little bit about your history first, and I'll go ahead and go next.
Okay, well, so I kind of got into this, I guess the long way. I've always had an interest in, websites, doing stuff online. I just, for some reason, never decided to actually sit down and do it. Honestly, it kind of intimidated me, especially, you kind of go into like a page's background and see all the code, and it's like, who in the right mind would really ever want to do that? You screw up one thing and it would, go crazy. Um, so I went a different path. I've been to college. Actually have 3 degrees, which are going to cost me a lot of money and the rest of my life to pay for those. And at the end of the day, I'm not really happy with where I'm at. Um, I'm sure you probably heard, Alex, the saying where you want to do something that you're going to wake up and actually enjoy doing, and it doesn't feel like work. Like, they'll get something passionate, that you enjoy, and you'll never have to work a day in your life. Have you heard of that before?
Yeah, definitely. It's something I follow a lot just because I've worked a lot of dead end jobs at retail and doing sales and all that other stuff, and it's just miserable half the time. I mean, I can imagine even what you're doing, it's not much better.
Yeah, well, nobody should ever have to work retail. That is just a thankless job. Fast food, thankless job. Thank God for people that do it. I've worked my fair share. I've never worked fast food. I've never worked in a restaurant, just because I want to actually be able to go back out to eat and not think of like seeing horrific things that have happened. So my job right now is I've worked. I guess I can go back into a little bit of my background. So I've you know, getting out of high school, I didn't go straight to college. I worked in a movie theater for a little bit. I did actually do tech support for a while at a dial-up. Yes, I am old. Um, so I did that for a couple of years. Uh, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed working, with computers. I did not enjoy working with the end user that didn't understand how it worked. They just thought it was magic. It's not. Uh, I ended up going to college. I had 2 bachelor degrees in education. The worst thing about getting a bachelor degree in education is you really never get a chance to actually sit down and teach until like your last semester, at least in the school I went to. So I have a bachelor. One's in social science, the other one's in English. I go out to do my first, my student teaching semester, and realize that I hate it. I enjoy working with people one on one, but I did not enjoy getting up in front of people that really don't want me to be there and trying to teach them stuff. Unfortunately, I might like college. I don't know. So I got out of there. I was unhappy. Ended up doing some work with uh, at a place that is a crisis unit, working with people that were schizophrenic, drug users, homicidal, suicidal. I've had trees thrown at me, like the potted fake trees. People try to strangle me, that kind of stuff. The normal, typical stuff to do at a job. Worked for Child Protective Services for a while, which taught me a lot about life and just the dark side of that. Now I work as at a therapeutic group home with 18 boys. 8 teen boys. It's 8 boys and they're teenagers. So I was gonna say that does not sound right. Uh, I'm like that to me. That's a lot of kids. I have a master's degree now in social work, and it is something I'm passionate about. It's I do feel passionate. We were talking about this the other day, where you said that you kind of avoid the news and stuff at times because you just don't want to get angry about stuff. As a social worker, unfortunately, I see the news every day. I like the Sandra Bland thing. It irritates me to no end because I don't feel like there's any justice for people. But at some point, I think the problem becomes. I was listening to an old radio show. Oh well, I can even say that I actually did paranormal talk radio for a while too, for a couple of years. But I am really inspired by Art Bell, and I was listening to an actual old show of his, and he was talking to a guy named Father Malachi Martin, which is an exorcist, and he was talking about how people that do work where they're helping others, they have to give a little bit of themselves every time they do that job. So they're helping somebody, and they have to give of themselves to help that person overcome what's happening. And unfortunately, I feel like at some point I've reached that limit where I give of myself and I give, and I wore out.
Yeah.
And it's something that I feel like you have to give 100%, which I'm still doing, but I don't think I can go the rest of my life doing that. And plus, it's something that I don't get a lot of joy out of. As much as I enjoy sitting down and working on, and problem solving when I'm working with code. So, I did decide that, it's good to have a hobby and good to do something on the side. And why not learn something that's going to be useful that I could switch to? So I sat down and started learning Ruby, and right now I'm actually learning JavaScript, and I really enjoyed working with that. Daily. I look forward to coming home, sitting down, and figuring it out, solving those problems, and get a lot of joy out of it. So that's kind of where I'm at here, and I know we're going to talk later in another show about how exactly we picked which direction we're going. There's a lot of choices, so we can wait for that. So how about you, Alex? How exactly would you get into this?
Yeah, so it's kind of like this long, convoluted story. Kind of, it's not as bad as I didn't go as far as taking 3 degrees in college, but it's kind of that typical 18-year-old wanting to get out of high school and move out type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was in high school, I was originally getting into 3D development, and I had kind of played around with programming for a while throughout high school, did a couple game competitions, and never really pursued it after that, and thought of it as a career, just because I didn't really know any resources of where I can learn from it. So I found the site Blender Guru and CG Cookie for you guys that are 3D developers out there, or maybe even heard of it. Um, I found that, and then I found a 3D demo reel trailer for a movie on that, and I thought that was really neat. So I got into that. And then when I got out of high school, I decided I was going to go into 3D level development for games. In other words, developing the maps and then the different stuff that goes on it. Well, I went to ITT for about a trimester, and I was out in California, and essentially it just really didn't work out. Everything just kind of went downhill. I didn't really like what I was doing there. Um, Honestly, the classes I was taking were just extremely repetitive and boring. And after a while, I got to the point where I realized all I was doing is just creating images that were just going to sit there, and it wasn't really useful to me. So when I got back, I decided to look into other stuff like networking and things like that. And I had found a friend a while back doing 3D development who switched as well, who was doing web development, what we're doing and going into now on Full Sail. And I started talking to him, and he decided to start showing me a little bit of what he was doing, and he introduced me to like HTML through it's like on I think it's like NetTuts Plus now, or Tuts Plus now, or something like that.
Yeah, Tuts Plus.
It was like their course on like 30 days of HTML and CSS. So I got introduced to that, and it was actually pretty interesting. So I kind of pursued it from there. And once I got more interested in it, he kind of started to show me a little bit more and more. And then he eventually, since he was going online, he gave me his classes that he was taking. So essentially, I started doing the same thing he was doing from those videos. So I was actually getting the Full Sail curriculum and kind of going through that a bit. And then it kind of like tapered off again because I was kind of like getting bored just creating static websites, and I wasn't really doing anything exciting.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of decided later on toward the year just to kind of take time off still, because I was waiting for stuff for my school to go through for financial aid. So I kind of tapered off on that. didn't really think about it, kind of quit. And when it came time to go back to school again, I was like, all right, let me think of what I want to do. I don't want to just go into a course on just strictly web development, because that just teach me how to create essentially static websites in college. Um, so I decided to go into the software course, for my associates, which I'm pursuing right now, and I'll be getting out in 2016. And I've just been doing that ever since. And then essentially, I decided to start up a blog thanks to John Sonmez, who I found on the internet, who really started to get me interested in more and more of how to really build myself up as a developer, rather than just getting the degree and then, hoping I find a job and, get out somewhere. Because honestly, so far, going to school in my associate's degree, it really hasn't taught me a whole lot of what I needed to do. So I kind of ended up doing more research on stuff, and then that's kind of how I ended up finding, that I needed to create a blog and create a podcast and get a Twitter account. And that's essentially how I ended up where I'm at now, learning full stack JavaScript. But before I got to full stack JavaScript, I was actually interested in doing Android. But before I got to Android, this is where learning in my college courses came in, because I was learning Java. It was because I wanted to get back into game development. And I went on this whole binge of trying to create a game, and kind of steered away from it and kind of went toward more application-based stuff. And I found that more interesting and a lot more easier to accomplish. And I was like, all right, let's try Android. And when I was doing Android for a little while, it was fun for a little while, and then it kind of didn't really click anymore, and I just kind of lost interest in it. And so that's kind of when I made the switch after talking to you about full stack JavaScript as a career rather than Android. Even though I went through that thing of what I was saying earlier about just creating websites and stuff, and I felt that full stack JavaScript gave me the opportunity to get the best of both worlds, being able to create applications and not just static websites. So that's kind of how I ended up where I'm in now. And it was just kind of like this long chain of events from 18 to 21 now, and after the past couple of years now, I've just been kind of really, focusing down what I want to do, and it's how I ended up here.
Yeah, I've got you. So, yeah, I mean, that's, you were talking about how you're trying to figure out a couple resources to get where you are now. I mean, if I had to go into, mine, when I sit down and I decided I was going to do this, it was almost like there's so many choices. You can get to that where you've got something called paralysis analysis or analysis paralysis. I don't know, one of those two, where you've got there's so many things. I went to a meetup last night, and I don't think I spoke to two or three people that were doing the same type of language. I spoke to somebody that was doing Clojure, which is the first time I'd ever heard of Clojure. I spoke to somebody doing Ruby. I spoke to somebody that was in Java. So there's so many choices where you just got to make, it's almost like you got to make one or you'll just never do anything.
Essentially you got to just jump off the cliff and go in. I mean, that's the only reason, like you said, otherwise you're never going to move anywhere, and you're just going to end up in an endless for loop. Haha,
Yeah. The loops are bad.
Yeah.
Don't do it. And somebody last night also told me that, is a good advice. He said that, pick a language, learn it, and then once you learn that, you're going to learn the way that language is structured. You're going to, we were talking about Ruby, because that was the first one I actually got into. So you get into Ruby, and you got your strings, you got your arrays, you got your hashes, you got your loops. And then, when I went over to JavaScript, I'm starting looking, I'm like, well, this looks familiar. Because and we'll talk later about why I went into JavaScript. But the reason it's all there. It's all the kind of the same thing. It's familiar. It's sort of it's French and Spanish sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them are really familiar once you know one language. It's kind of all the same concept, just different syntax and how you apply it. Yeah. But the other thing too is just really picking. Like I said, there's so many frameworks and so many languages out there. Just like we said, you just gotta pick one that you think you like, and you sit down with it and you can understand. That's why I chose JavaScript, honestly. Like I said, and I mean, I know a little bit of Ruby because I touched on it a tiny bit.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I really went back to JavaScript just for the fact that it's so simplistic to use and easy to apply to things versus where, for instance, when I'm using Android, there's like a billion things you got to understand how to use.
Yeah.
I mean, just like you want to start naming off things, but to get sidetracked. But there's just so much that you gotta. There's such a steep learning curve to it, to where when you do JavaScript, it's more of a quick, in more of the instant gratification
Mm-hmm.
that I look for and stuff. I mean, and I know you can't really chase that when you program, but
I don't
uh,
know. I think when you begin, you kind of want to have that chase. I mean,
you want to feel like you're
there's
understanding what you're doing essentially, because like I honestly like when I was doing like for JavaScript and going through certain courses and stuff that I've been learning off of, I don't have to look up a lot of the stuff. Like when it has a challenge, I don't have to go look it up. I just know it.
yeah,
Versus with Android, I had to look everything up, and I know that's not a bad thing, but it's honestly discouraging because you just feel like you don't know what you're doing half the time,
yeah,
and
yeah.
it, it's just it is what it is in my opinion. I mean, other people have other experiences where they'll pick one language up easier than the other. I mean, I know for me when I went to my C++ class, that was a nightmare. And I had a 17-year-old kid that's been doing it for a year, I think a year or two, who knew it better than I did, you know. But it was just because he understood it better.
Yeah. Well, I even, just speaking to someone last night, he said he tried to go into programming. He did a QA, and he said it just didn't speak to him. It wasn't the way his mind worked. Some people are gonna, one of the reasons because I will eventually go back to Ruby, but one of the reasons I picked Ruby is because it was designed to be a simple language, and to me that makes sense. I
Well,
want something that's going to be quick and simple. JavaScript seems to just make sense to me. I don't know if I'll ever get into C. I'd like to eventually. Eventually I want to become a polyglot, but there's no rush to get to that point.
well, I think the other thing too that comes when picking a language is picking a community that comes with that language.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I honestly noticed, like, okay, like, if, for instance, like, I was reading, like, a lot of blogs. They're like, all right, you get involved in a community, all right? Well, if you type in Android community, it's not going to really bring up a bunch of stuff. It's just going to bring up random forums. That's not honestly a community to me.
No.
I see, like, places like Treehouse, that's a community of people that you can help.
Mm-hmm.
But you type in JavaScript, community or Ruby on Rails community or whatever, you're able to find that on places like Code Newbies.
Yeah.
Like that's where we hang out. Um, you know, that's a community to me because it's a bunch of people in one, and they have like Slack and they have all that other places or like that you can go and talk to or
Mm-hmm.
people you can go talk to. It's not, and they're not and they're not mean. To where people are like, oh well, you need to get a reputation up on Stack Overflow and
Yeah.
get in that community. To me, there's a difference of getting into a community and helping a community. You
Yeah.
know, like otherwise, that's how that's kind of how we met. Is because I was just tweeting stuff, and then I just found you.
Yeah.
But I was targeting it toward a certain amount of people. You know, and that's just kind of how it works. I mean, but honestly, you just gotta find a good community to work with too, and that's the bigger thing. I mean, especially if you don't live in a big area like I do, finding that online community is the bigger part of it to get out there.
Mm-hmm. Well, and even I mean, I live in Baltimore, so last night I said I went to a meetup. It was actually like a super meetup so it was a meetup of meetups that are in the area, but it's not something I can go to every day. And you were saying Code Newbie, I love the Slack channel. Saron that does the podcast. I listen to it weekly. It is inspiring. And that I think a community that is something that is helpful towards new people is really what's needed. I mean,
Well,
number one,
the biggest thing I like about them is that weekly like Twitter chat where they're like, "Hey,
yeah,
go and send a project to us," and then they retweet it
hmm
because there's a lot of people that are viewing that.
yeah,
And it's like, all right, you keep doing that every week, you're gonna end up getting more traction to stuff.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing. I mean, obviously you got to do other stuff, but it's still the point that they allow that friendly environment. They're not, those angry coder people that just don't like anybody talking about anything. And that's something I don't like about a lot of places. It's just like, oh, well, they tell you to get your information out there. They tell you to get into a community, but those communities don't like you coming in there and saying, hey, I'm working on a project, or hey, I'm looking for X person, because they
Yeah.
just think it's spam. It's like okay, well, it's a chicken and egg problem, and I think Code Newbie just completely doesn't care, obviously, unless you just start repeatedly doing bad stuff. But they allow you to get involved, and I
Hmm.
like that about it. And they, like you said, they inspire me a lot with a lot of the people that get on there, along with Treehouse and John Sonmez, which I think he was my biggest influence for getting all of my projects started, because I just needed to get it going. But without getting a little bit off track here, let's go ahead and kind of wrap a little bit of things up here and kind of explain a little bit more about kind of what we're going to be introducing on the show here, and kind of go from there.
Well,
Um,
I think first off, we're the way we're directing this is that we're new. We have no pretensions of neither one of us are going to be here. Like, well, I'm a Ruby expert. Yeah, that's not the case. We are a long way from ever being an expert, and I think even we have people that even come into Code Newbie. This is like, oh, I've been working 7 years as a coder. I still don't really know exactly what I'm doing. It just works. So I think both of us are coming from the perspective of we're new. You're going to be seeing us as we go ahead. You'll probably see us both get our first jobs in the field and see how we grow. And at the same time, we want to bring people on that are in the same boat, if I understand correctly, right?
Yeah, we want to bring in people that are like us, and the reason we're wanting to do this, like, well, like it's like Code Newbie, how they bring in people who are new, and kind of talk to them about what they're currently doing in their jobs, but and how they kind of explain their journey. But we're kind of wanting to go completely lower than that. Like, I listen to a lot of podcasts saying, all right, this is what you're doing in our journey. This is how you improve your career. What we're essentially wanting to do is what he said. We bring on these new people, and we essentially talk and explain how we're doing it as it's happening, not after the fact. That way, 5 years from now, you guys can come back to our first show, for instance, and look and actually see how we're doing it. That way, it's not some giant mystery, honestly, because I mean, while it still is to me right now, it's slowly starting to be uncovered, and I want to go over certain topics. I mean, outside code, even just like how we got our Twitter going and how we got a podcast up, and how we're driving that momentum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm also I'm a social worker and a therapist. So if you're having trouble, we can talk about that too. So
You
it's
find yourself crying in the fetal position in the corner
yeah,
because
yeah.
you can't figure out that bug. You know who to call.
It's a welcoming place. How does that make you feel? So, but I mean, it's everybody starts somewhere. Everybody, and that's the thing is, we uh, you, we're going to talk about where you started. Every hero has a beginning and has a journey, and
Unless you're
we're going to look.
Aquaman and then you don't have a journey or a starting, you just live in water.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, let's look at yeah, you look at the Hobbit. You've got to go out that front door, and you got to take your first steps. And we're going to talk to you before you get to Mordor. So,
Yeah, and but like what was Nick was saying too is I wanted to kind of mention too as well that obviously I'm still starting out on my own coding. Like I have knowledge and background of different languages, but I haven't fully gone from point A to point B and finished everything. And that's kind of what I'm really working on now, and that's kind of what, like Nick was saying, we want to show on that side as well.
hmm
And another thing too, if you guys have questions, like I don't know if you already mentioned it, I probably did, but uh, if you have questions or anything to us, I mean, if like on how to do certain things, feel free to ask us. If we can answer it, we'll ask it or answer it. I mean,
yeah, and plus, I mean, if there's, because this is, our first show, if there's stuff you want us to talk about. Like I think
Fix.
some of the upcoming shows that we're going to talk about is kind of like I said before, how did we decide which path we're going to go down. Another one's going to be resources we've used. We talked a little bit about some of those, like Code Newbie. We've talked about, John Sonos. I'm probably butchering that name. You're, a little more
Yeah,
much more into
it's
the.
yeah. He's someone you should check out though sometime, Nick. His name is John Sonmez over at simpleprogrammer.com.
Okay.
He he actually runs a couple podcasts that I think is interesting to listen to. Even if you're like really brand new, it kind of gives you that inspiration of, all right, this is where I could be. Uh, just because of the way how what he talks about and different things like that. He actually runs his first podcast is kind of him answering questions, and then his other podcast is the Entrepreneur Podcast,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like I think there's like 4 or 5 of them who just sit in a chat and kind of just talk about projects they're working on and what they've been doing in their careers. And then the other one is his Get Up and Code podcast. It's like a fitness podcast. Um, but yeah, I mean, another thing too, guys, is kind of getting off track here, but another book you guys should get that I think would really help you guys out is his book, Soft Skills. It just goes over a variety of different things that is non-code related. That is why I'm creating this blog, and this podcast is like a lot of other people will say. But it goes over things like marketing yourself as a software developer, the general concept of it, um, why you should get a blog and why you should get a podcast. And those are the main important things I can remember from the book. But it also goes over things like making sure you keep fit, keep your wellness and so forth. So it goes over a lot of things that I think are important as well when you're going on this gigantic journey to a career. That way you don't burn out and end up that 500 500-pound stereotypical coder living in your mom's basement.
There's nothing wrong living in a basement.
Okay, I know you're in a basement. That was not a crack at you. You know what I mean?
I'm in a townhome, but there's nothing wrong with you. Why alienate people? There might be people like that out there. Who knows? So, and they're
Okay.
doing this to get out of the basement.
Okay, let me rephrase this. Don't be a 500-pound coder.
All right. So, I think we should go ahead and probably wrap up. And like I said, the next episode we will be talking about how we decided to go the way we went. So, I guess our roadmap doesn't have to be your roadmap, but at least you maybe could learn something or learn what not to do at times.
Yeah, learn from our mistakes and also essentially go on our roadmap if you want and follow our journey and hopefully go in the right direction with us.
Or possibly the wrong direction, and we can all make a diversion together.
Exactly. We don't know yet, but that's the whole point of this. Hopefully it all goes well in the long run.
We'll all learn how to debug together.
So. And then Nick will therapy. Give us all therapy.
After I stop crying. So, I guess we will be with you next time. If you have any questions, we have an email address, or I guess you could talk to us on Twitter.
Yeah, talk to us on Twitter right now, considering we're right in the middle of a domain change, right?
Yeah. So, I don't like talking bad about places, but a domain host that has ones in their name, look, Control Panel works.
Yeah, we had technical issues. Let's just put it that way. So right now we're switching over everything. Probably by the time this actually gets uploaded and you guys are probably listening to everything, the website should be back up and we'll be announcing it on Twitter. So that's gonna be the most recent place to check. So you can follow me at Alex Courtney, and Nick, you can go ahead and give me your Twitter.
You might want to spell your last name because that's not a common last name. So.
Yeah, so for you guys that want to follow me on there, it's at Alex Courtney, so it's capital ALEX and then capital G WARTNEY. No, all lowercase after the G.
All right, and then mine is at Nick Queen, and that's Nick NICK, and then Queen QUEEN, like the rock band or the old lady that continues to say she's not my grandmother. and it's what written me out of her will in England. So.
All right, guys, that's it for this episode, and come join us next time on the next episode. Like we said, we're going to be showing you guys our roadmap of where we're at and how we're doing it.
All right, awesome. Thanks.
So again, my name is Alex Courtney.
And mine's Nick Queen.
And we'll be talking to you guys later. Bye.
Bye.